Yes, we're going to be talking on monitoring, reporting, and evaluations, and my name is Janice Arnold. I'm the Board Development Consultant at MSBA. If you're listening to this as a recording, the original air date was May 26th, 2016. Therefore, the interactive questions are unavailable, but you can contact the MSBA office if you do have questions. Okay, I'm just flipping over to a new screen here. It might take a couple of seconds to load. Just be patient, but there you should have it up. As shown on the title slide, this webinar is part of the E2G series on effective and efficient governance, or E2G as we sometimes call it, and it's part of the standards framework developed by MSBA on effective and efficient governance. Our framework is a piece that's common to many school board associations, and it looks at how optimally functioning school boards strike a balance between efficiency and effectiveness. It addresses how school boards meet their responsibilities to students and communities to the highest of standards and to focus on student achievement and success. MSBA's E2G package, it's a number of things. It contains many governance resources such as these live and recorded webinars and 5 to 10-minute trainer videos that we call division dispatches and which you can access through our YouTube channel. We also offer in-person workshops, which can be booked through me at the association office, and resource material available through all of these mediums and on our website. If you look for the E2G logo shown here on the bottom right as the identifier, you'll find pieces of me on the webcam. Hello, everybody. And I will for those of you that are coming in on your very first webinar, you'll see underneath the camera there with my picture on it a window, and at the very bottom of that there's a bar there. If you have any questions throughout the whole presentation, you can just type them in there. No one else sees your questions except me, and for those of you that are wondering, it works better to have the questions typed in here rather than going through them verbally. I know I have a couple of school boards that are listening as a group at the division office, and it just takes down some of the outside noise, or for those of you listening at home, we can steer clear of the barking dogs, I guess. So just feel free to type in your question, and I'll take a look at them at the end and answer them verbally. And if you do think of something else that you'd like to address later, then feel free to call me at the office here. Okay. There we go. So if you are familiar with the E2G framework, you'll know that the first section covered 5 points under effective governance, and that this webinar is covering the last 2 points under the section on an efficient school system. That's an efficient system of governors and school boards that seek to empower others to administer and manage that system, while of course still maintaining ultimate accountability for that system themselves. And within that framework, it's in part accomplished through mandating robust monitoring and reporting structures and requiring regular, meaningful evaluations, including, of course, board self-evaluations. For the webinar today, it's possibly going to be a little bit shorter than some that I've given, but it's by no means less important. This, in fact, is a very complex area and involves many moving pieces. It's ongoing, and it itself requires some flexibility. It's the ongoing assessment tools and flexibility of those tools used to do it. With the limited time allowed just in this webinar series, I'll be covering really just the basics today and providing I'm hoping some food for thought if you'd like to review the processes and systems currently used in your own division. And if you feel that there are some pieces here, you can also just, if you choose to show some of your other board members or trustees, you can even just show part of this recording. I choose to pull up these 2 areas of the E2G framework together because I think that they obviously go hand in hand, monitoring and reporting and evaluations. With monitoring and reporting, we'll cover today the obligation as publicly elected representatives that you have to connect with and report to your community. We'll also look at the importance of using student data to monitor progress and how to use it. And I'd like to present some ideas about how to make monitoring and reporting meaningful and manageable, so it's so that it's not just paying lip service and I guess going through the motions. On evaluations, then when I work with boards, I guess towards self-evaluation, I often explain it as a look at the what and the how. So I'll quickly cover a little bit just what I mean by that. And then evaluations are also a collaborative exercise. So I'll give you some tools you can use for that, or resource that you can use. And last, making evaluations purposeful, so that they're looking to the future and setting a path for progress. As school board governors in Manitoba, trustees have a particular obligation to connect with those in their community. So unlike directors of, say, a private company, you must be more accountable than to just a specific shareholder group. Your connections must also stretch wider than those of a special interest nonprofit board. It's not just those with, I don't know, say pets or political or healthcare cause. And it is definitely not just those with children in the system. So if you don't know, on average, including all divisions in Manitoba, it's actually only about 30% of your constituents that have kids in the school system. So it's a lot more than that pay taxes and that you are, of course, accountable to. I would also argue that there is even a closer personal connection than those of local government, because the expectations for there are expectations for children within the community. Those in the community, they assume a certain level of direct communication and involvement with their trustees. And on the tail end of that comes the obligation for monitoring what is going on in the division and, of course, reporting it back to the community. So you have been elected to be their eyes and ears, if you like. In the E2G webinar on community engagement, I quoted Woodrow Wilson, who said, "The ear of the leader must ring with the voices of the people." And I have covered many important principles about connecting with your public. Once you've connected with them, involving them in setting the direction for the division, and setting that direction, I guess, is the next step, is really letting them know that you have heard them. And how do you do that? That was one of the questions I asked you in the poll. First, you need to look back at the specific goals or objectives that they have helped you set for the division. So as a board, you have, I guess, set specific programs and goals or objectives to be monitored and reported on. And that sounds simple enough. You know, let's just take a look at everything division-wide. But first you have to answer, with what purpose are you looking at those things? Or what specifically do we need to look at in order to get the answers that we need, or something that we're looking for? That's where you start, and that can be one of the hardest things. So a quick example would be if you wanted to see where students in your division stood in terms of literacy, you need to decide in relation to what? In relation to the province, the country, other countries? What did you set out to do if you were, looking at improving literacy? Where within the spectrum does your community want the division to sit? And do you, as the elected officials of that community, do you know that? What are the expectations of your community? Is it to see if students are prepared after they graduate to enter the workforce, go on to post-secondary, or to enter a trade? Is that what your community wants? And are you looking for a trend showing improvement only within your division over the last few years? Maybe that's what you need to focus on. You'll recall at the beginning of today's webinar, one of the questions answered, what type of surveying do you do? And maybe this is an area and the detail to which you can go. So you're looking at those things. So the first part of monitoring is to know what you want to look at and what to ask, so you'll get the answers that you need, not some vague answer that really has no purpose. So look first to what purpose. You're answering that question first. To what purpose do we need to be answering or focus our questions on? Is it focused also on student achievement, or are you just focused on gym equipment? which of course isn't really under board's jurisdiction. So really going back to those fundamental questions and saying, are we asking things that are focusing on student achievement? It's also deciding upon the actual tool that you use. Is it objective? Is it current? Will it show you what you need it to show? And how does that tool you need, does it even exist at present? How do you get your hands on it? And how and by whom will it be administered? Is it impartial? And I like this one is, can it be summarized easily, or will you be lost in the details so that you don't even know, what you need to know? You don't even know what to ask. You need to decide what you are actually monitoring and over what period. And going back to what I said at the beginning of this slide, do you have the capacity to monitor everything, or will you look at perhaps just programming, student success, facilities, staff? It comes back to the goals that your board set for itself, perhaps as a board in general, or maybe in your multi-year strategic plan. Or do you have a multi-year strategic plan? And how are you going to move towards that, or monitor whether you're actually accomplishing what you actually set out for yourselves? Or maybe it's something that the government has asked you to do. If your community gave input into, for example, your multi-year strategic plan, and it's a plan with solid steps towards student achievement, then that is certainly something you need to monitor on a regular basis. But you also, very importantly, need to report back to your community on that progress. The second step in monitoring and evaluation actually has three parts. First one is building capacity to carry out regular and meaningful reporting and monitoring. What a trend is, or looking at what a trend is, it's very important. Having, maybe you can't have a major knee-jerk reaction to something that is really a blip on the whole division's work, and that's not helpful at all. So looking at meaningful pieces. Also establishing the responsibility for it. Do you have someone on the board that provides oversight? Is the person really in charge of that, or is the champion of that particular initiative? Is this an administrative or an external task? Do you bring someone in? Is the person responsible up to it, and do they actually understand the importance of it? The third thing is really, it's developing support and buy-in throughout the division that says the board takes this seriously. They will be assessing the division on a regular basis, and they will be basing their decisions on what they've heard. Once you establish that and really show that the board is 100% behind it, I think you'll find that others within your division, both staff or community, will really see how important it is and want to be part of that or participate. Many of the themes within the E2G framework, they're connected and they overlap. But by building capacity, this really relates to another webinar on ensuring staffing levels and expertise. And it also directly relates at the board table. It's allowing time to do a good job of this, because if you're going to be basing decisions on this, you need to do a good job of that, whether it's at the board level or your administration. So this is not something to be taken lightly, and it will be an ongoing part of your work at the board. It never ends. Therefore, building it into your annual cycle of work, or building the capacity and providing the authority to carry it out, is really the board's contribution towards this whole area. The next step is establishing that baseline. If you're familiar with the Lighthouse Study, or as it's more formally called, Leadership for Student Learning, those modules, they were put out by the Iowa School Boards Association, and they make much of the use of student data and data-driven decisions. The Lighthouse Study believes that by analyzing the data with the purpose of finding areas for development, the board will not only know where to provide the right resources and support for student achievement, but they will have the reasoning behind making those decisions. It's then much easier to build support for your plans. If you think about it when you're at the board table and debating on one idea or a plan, just think of it this way: clear articulation of your sound argument backed by solid data. That's really hard to refute. It's also going to show you what you will be monitoring after. If you want to look at this concept a little bit more in depth, there's another recorded webinar in our library. If you look under on our website under Trustee Education, the webinar is also part of the E2G series, and it's called E2G Learning and Achievement for All, and it looks at the Lighthouse Study much more in depth. But it really also leads to the next part here. Reporting. This is where things come full circle. As an elected trustee, you've heard from your community, students, staff, parents, business, organizations, and agencies, on and on, all the groups that make up your community. They were there at the start, and if you want to keep them involved and engaged, it's incumbent upon you to report back. Reporting back to them should include the responses to what they asked you. The responses should be clear, using, and very importantly, the same language and intent that was used by them at the beginning, so it's understandable. Responses, of course, should be timely. It's not enough to respond back just before the next election. At a minimum, major initiatives, you need to respond or update them actually annually. Think of it as the officials that you elected to, say, provincial or federal government. It would never do for them to report back on major initiatives once every 4 years. So lay out the next steps, have a plan. Here's what we're going to do to accomplish that, whatever that may be. I had said at the beginning that I'm often asked about evaluation, or that I talk about, I guess, evaluation in simple terms, and it's looking at the what and the how. I could do actually a 2-hour session on this today, but using this one slide, I'll just say that the how refers to functions, or the functioning of the board. They're things, are things looking and working like a well-oiled machine at your board table? How is your board functioning in its day-to-day business? How is the senior administrative team functioning? Do the two function well together? And then the what refers to the goals, objectives, or priorities, the initiatives that you set for your board or division. You may have heard of setting SMART goals, or specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. I've done a short 5-minute video on our YouTube channel on SMART goals. If you want to find out more about setting SMART goals, if you've set up your own goals or your strategic plan in this fashion with an accompanying administrative or operations plan, that's set up, I guess, in the same way with using SMART goals. It becomes really easy to monitor, evaluate, and report on. A good resource that you may want to check out and find out or take from our website is on our MSBA website. If you look under the Resources tab and Publications, you'll find this booklet, the one shown here, called Leading Together. In it, there's an entire section on evaluations. It provides different models as well as addressing data collection and having that all-important conversation about outcomes. Which brings me to the next piece. I look at evaluations as an opportunity for adjustment, improvement, and progress, not necessarily a critique. Even if it's often referred to, and people like to say, constructive criticism, I was just giving them constructive criticism, I think that there has to be an added piece asking, what is really the intention of the evaluation? Without the objective of adjustment, improvement, or progress, then it is just criticism. And it's hard to make meaningful or long-lasting change without buy-in. So taking that collaborative approach to evaluation can really create a win-win scenario, which is what you're looking to do. We often think of evaluations in terms of job evaluations. And certainly there is that part of it, but this collaborative approach also holds true with the outcome of monitoring and reporting on progress, needs assessments, or survey results and such. Whether it's any of these, the setup, data gathering and conversations, the critical purpose of evaluations are the future plans that come out of all those pieces. If your board has student achievement and success as its mandate, then solid future plans will move you forward or help you maintain that direction. So to finish off, aside from the purpose of evaluations, progress is the all-encompassing purpose of monitoring, reporting, and evaluations. I said earlier that these pieces need to be purposeful or meaningful and not just a throwaway, let's get through it. If yours is an efficient and effective board, which is what this is all about, then this part of the E2G framework is one of the main structures within that frame and acts as a support for almost all the work you will do. The first step for your board could be to step back and evaluate your own processes and systems for monitoring, reporting, and evaluation. So to summarize these 2 points of the E2G framework and what they call for, it's, as I said, mandating robust monitoring and reporting structures. This would be directly within the scope and authority of the Board of Trustees. And the second part, requiring regular, meaningful evaluations, including, of course, board self-evaluations. There's nothing like setting, of course, a good example for the rest of the division by doing your own self-evaluation. MSBA has worked with boards to review and or develop good practices for board evaluations. So if that's something you'd like to explore a little bit further, you can contact me at the association office. So I'm going to flip over to this last part here. As I said, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter one today, and if there's any questions that you'd like to pose, as I said, you can put them at the bottom of that window there, and I'll address them in just a moment. So I will point out one thing. If you look at the screen with the lines at the top there, you'll see that it says E2G Monitoring, Reporting, and Evaluations. It's a PDF file. It covers a lot of the pieces that I talked about today and maybe a few more. It talks about some of the steps that you could take. If you click on it and then click on Download File, you can do that. It's also found on our website. It's posted there under our library of webinars, so you can access it later if you've lost it in your files or forgotten where you put it. I will also say that we've noted down here that you can check back on our website often for future webinars. We often advertise our webinars through our divisional mail that goes out once a week on Wednesdays, I believe it is. And the plan for our next webinar is that we're going to take, as often school boards do, we take a bit of a break through the summer in putting out these webinars. We will likely post the last of the webinars related to the E2G package sometime throughout the summer or into the early fall. And as I said, you can access any of those, and we also have E2G division dispatches that you can access on our website. So I see that there's no more questions, or there aren't any questions posed today. We've all headed into summer mode. So I will leave you with that, and I hope you join us again for one of the webinars, and hope that you have found what we've talked about today helpful. Have a good summer.